If you can't handle disturbing stories, you might want to leave now. Because what you're about to hear is the story of a man who kept an entire city awake and terrified for over a year. A man who wrote letters to the police, mocking them. A man the whole world would come to know as Son of Sam. But here's the strangest part of this story. He wasn't caught because of some brilliant detective work or a dramatic breakthrough. He was caught because a parking ticket became the critical thread that led right to him. So, if you're still here, my friend, get comfortable. Dim the lights, put on your headphones, because this story is about to get very, very dark. Let's begin. New York City, 1976. The summer was hot, the streets were loud, and somewhere out there, a man was watching. On the night of July 29th, 1976, two young women, 18-year-old Donna Loria and her 19-year-old friend Jody Valenti, were sitting in a parked car in the Bronx. They were just talking, the way people do on an ordinary summer night. Then, without warning, a man approached the car. He pulled out a gun, and he opened fire. Donna Loria was killed. Jody Valenti was wounded, but survived. At first, police treated it as an isolated shooting, just another random act of violence in a big, dangerous city. But nobody knew what was coming next, because this wasn't an isolated crime, and it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Over the following months, more attacks happened, almost always at night, almost always with the same weapon, a .44 caliber revolver. The victims were mostly young people, sitting in parked cars or walking home, and many of them were couples on dates. On October 23, 1976, Carl DeNaro and Rosemary Keenan were shot at in Queens. Both survived. On November 27th, two teenage girls, 16-year-old Donna DeMasi and 18-year-old Joanne Lomino, were shot as they walked home from a movie. DeMasi recovered. Lomino was left paralyzed. On January 30th, 1977, Christine Freund was killed while sitting in a car with John Deal, who was wounded but survived. Then, on March 8th, a 19-year-old college student named Virginia Vushkarakian was shot and killed, just blocks from her own home. Detectives began to notice something chilling. The ballistics matched every scene. Same gun, same shooter. New York City had a serial killer on its hands. And the most terrifying part? He wasn't choosing victims he knew. He was choosing them completely at random. You could simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time and suddenly become a target. That randomness is what put the entire city on edge. Women stopped going out at night. Couples avoided parking in quiet spots. An entire city changed its behavior because of one man with a gun. Then, something happened that made the case even more disturbing. On April 17th, 1977, a young couple, 18-year-old Valentina Suriani and 20-year-old Alexander Esau, were killed while sitting in a car in the Bronx. But this time, the killer left something behind. A letter addressed to the police, and in it, he gave himself a name. Son of Sam. The letter was strange, rambling, and deeply unsettling, filled with dark language that suggested the killer believed some force or some voice was driving him to kill. The letter soon reached the press. He wrote to the well-known columnist Jimmy Breslin, mocking police and promising more violence was coming. The name Son of Sam spread across New York, and then across the entire country. People weren't just afraid of an anonymous gunman anymore. Now, the killer had a name, a voice, a twisted identity of his own, and he seemed to enjoy the fear he was creating. Still, police had nothing solid enough to catch him. On June 26, 1977, another attack happened, this time in Bayside, Queens. Judy Placido and Sal Lupo were shot, but this time both survived. And more importantly for investigators, they were able to give police a description of their attacker. It was a new piece of the puzzle, but the killer was still free, and the city was still living in fear. By the summer of 1977, the manhunt had become massive. The NYPD assembled an enormous task force. Hundreds of detectives worked the case. Newspapers ran daily updates, and rewards were offered for information. But Son of Sam wasn't finished. Then came the night of July 31st, 1977. That night, Son of Sam struck again, this time in Brooklyn. Robert Violante and Stacy Moskowitz were on their first date. Without warning, a man opened fire on their car. Moskowitz was critically wounded. She died the next day. Violante survived, but lost most of his vision in one eye. But this time, something was different. A witness was nearby. A woman walking her dog that night noticed a Ford Galaxy parked close to the scene. She also noticed something else. The car had just received a parking ticket for stopping too close to a fire hydrant. At first, it didn't seem important, but that ticket had a specific time and location on it. Investigators began tracing every parking ticket issued in the area that night, and that simple, tedious process led them to one name: David Berkowitz. Detectives began digging into Berkowitz's background, and the closer they looked, the more red flags they found. There were prior complaints and reports connected to his erratic behavior, along with other threats tied to strange letters and disturbances back in Yonkers. The picture was coming together. On August 10th, 1977, police went to Berkowitz's residence in Yonkers, New York. When they found him, there was no chase, no long standoff. Detectives took him into custody on the spot. Inside his car, they found weapons, ammunition, and a handwritten letter that matched the style of the Son of Sam letters. At that moment, police knew. They had the man who had terrorized New York City for over a year. His name was David Berkowitz. He was 24 years old. He offered almost no resistance when he was arrested. According to reports, he simply looked at the officers and said, "Well, you got me." During questioning, Berkowitz confessed to all 8 shootings. He told investigators he had been hearing voices and that he believed some force was commanding him to kill. One of his strangest claims involved his neighbor, a man named Sam Carr. Berkowitz said that Sam Carr's black dog was, in his mind at the time, possessed by a demon, and that this demon was the one ordering him to kill. But here's where we have to be precise. This was Berkowitz's own account, not a proven fact. And more importantly, he later admitted the entire demon and dog story had been a lie, something he invented to mislead police and the press. There was never any evidence that a demon or dog was actually directing him. It was simply a story Berkowitz used to explain his crimes and hide his real motives. In the end, the most disturbing truth remained the simplest one. Over roughly 13 months, David Berkowitz killed 6 people and wounded 7 others across 8 separate shootings using a .44 caliber revolver, choosing his victims at random, in parked cars, on the street, or on their way home. All it took was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. In 1978, Berkowitz pleaded guilty to all 6 murders and was sentenced to 6 consecutive terms of 25 years to life. And here's the strangest detail of this entire case. An entire city lived in terror for over a year. hundreds of detectives worked around the clock. One of the largest manhunts in NYPD history was launched. And the killer himself mocked police in letter after letter. But in the end, there was no brilliant breakthrough, no dramatic chase, no cinematic confrontation. There was just a man who noticed a car, a parking ticket, and a timestamp written on a small piece of paper. That one small detail, combined with the rest of the investigation, helped police trace the car straight to David Berkowitz. An ordinary piece of paper became one of the most important threads that finally ended a city's year of terror. And that might be exactly what makes the story of Son of Sam so unforgettable. Sometimes, the most terrifying stories in the world don't end with some grand discovery. They end with the smallest detail, a simple coincidence, a human mistake, and a parking ticket that changed everything. This has been the story of Son of Sam. Good night.